Caitlin Huey-Burns is a reporter for RealClearPolitics and a CBSN political contributor, and she joins us right now. Caitlin, thank you so much. So, obviously, we're going to get to the climate deal in a moment, but first, let's talk about this news that FBI Director James Comey will be testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee, and we're hearing potentially President Trump could exercise his executive privilege here to block that testimony. Tell us about that.
Well, that's going to be very interesting because remember, Donald Trump, the president, is on record saying that he thought Comey was a showboat of sorts, that he called him a couple of different names. He also said in interviews that he brought up Comey's firing in the context of the Russia investigation. So, of course, there are all sorts of questions regarding Comey and the possible obstruction of justice that legal analysts say that there's not enough there yet, but waiting to hear what Comey has to say. We also know this president runs some of his own kind of counter-programming, right? And so as much as the White House wants to wall off the Russia investigation from the president's other tasks, the president has also taken to Twitter as recently as today to kind of comment on this going on. So we can probably expect him to have some things to say depending on what Comey says next week.
Is there historical precedence to a president actually using his executive privilege to block something like this?
Well, we haven't really seen the president talk this way about a former FBI director. So the nature of his firing is certainly unprecedented, and it's not clear yet whether he will be able to use that power. It's really interesting, though, that Comey and Robert Mueller, the person now leading the Russia investigation, they have a very close relationship. They work together at the FBI very closely, and so it is assumed that they have communicated, and as you mentioned in the lead-up, that this will be more focused on the firing and not about the investigation.
We heard yesterday that some former Obama administration officials, Susan Rice, Samantha Power, John Brennan, have all been subpoenaed. What's that about, and why are they being asked to come forward?
Right, exactly. Remember earlier, Republicans were really focused on this idea of unmasking names, and now Susan Rice was at the center of that, and she said that she had followed all of the protocol involved in unmasking names for intelligence purposes. Republicans are wanting to know whether she did so as used her position, or whether the intelligence community used some of their positioning to go after Trump campaign officials, whether there was anything out of the ordinary in terms of using that role for political purposes. So that's going to be kind of their focus, and it actually has been their focus throughout these investigations: intelligence leaks, unmasking, while Democrats have been focused on is there any evidence of collusion, the Russian meddling in the campaign. So sometimes when you watch these hearings, it's really kind of a tale of two hearings. And so I'm wondering kind of how both sides will react during the Comey testimony, for example.
And it seems also that both sides really are playing differently in the House versus the Senate as well. It seems the Senate may be working a little bit better together, you think?
Exactly. And remember, the former chairman, or the still chairman, Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee came under fire for his close relationship, of course, to the Trump White House and possible collusion as it pertains to the investigation. So he had stepped down from that role, at least as it pertains to Russia, but has actually still been active as there is another acting chairman for this purpose, but Nunes has still been active, which raises a lot of questions here. On the Senate side, they've been trying to show a bit of bipartisanship, right? Intelligence committees have usually been bipartisan, tried to be nonpartisan. The House kind of overstepped those boundaries. The Senate is trying to keep this on track.
I want to ask you about the big topic today, climate change, and whether the president's going to stay in this agreement or not. I'm curious about his fellow Republicans on the Hill. We know 22 Republicans did send a letter asking for him to leave. What's the sense on Capitol Hill within his own party?
Well, what's really interesting is going to be the political fallout of this. So yes, you have 22 senators led by Mitch McConnell, who of course hails from Kentucky. He's the Senate Majority Leader. Kentucky is a coal state. Other of these other senators who signed on to this are from coal states and think that this will really impact that. I've talked to some Republican strategists who say, look, this is something that speaks to, if he withdraws from this agreement, it not only fulfills a campaign promise that he made over and over again on the campaign trail, it also kind of really speaks to his personal base and to Republicans who don't kind of like these, regulations and such. And so at a time where he is, there is a threat of him losing some support with his core constituencies, as we've seen in some of these polls, this could kind of endear him to that. But you know that Democrats and a host of environmental groups will really go after this. And there's also a question, too, about whether when you're speaking to your direct base, whether you're alienating other constituencies, particularly young people that they want to bring into the Republican Party, whether this kind of alienates them as it pertains to climate policy.
Are you able to understand what it is? It appears that Steve Bannon and the EPA administration, Pruitt, are on one side from what we've heard, really convincing him you need to withdraw. What are they telling? Is there a sense as to what is able to convince him to withdraw besides his base?
Right. And I mean, this speaks to kind of his America first economic populism. You mentioned the words Paris and climate change, and a lot of people kind of in that camp are very turned off by it. So that's kind of what's leading that direction here. And we've been looking for clues in different kinds of decisions about what his policy really is. I mean, he campaigned America first on populism, but yet he's talked about, broadening foreign policy. So that's going to be really interesting. And then other people are wondering what this means for our role in the world if the U.S. withdraws from this kind of pact.
And to your point there, former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney had tweeted out about this, and he said affirmation of the Paris Agreement is not only about the climate, it is also about America remaining the global leader. So what does pulling out of this deal mean for U.S. leadership on the world stage?
Well, this is a really interesting perspective coming from Republicans. As we know, they have not really been champions of the climate change. So coming from Romney, this is significant, but it says more to me that they are more concerned about national security and U.S. role abroad in terms of this global frame. So that's kind of interesting to hear coming from Republicans, that that's mostly their focus. Whether the U.S. withdraws, what this means, not only for climate issues, of course, but what it means more broadly, kind of what role we'll have in the world as it pertains to this issue, but also national security issues, which are also intertwined with climate.
If the U.S. does withdraw, it's not an overnight process, is it?
That's right. There are a lot of different things going on here, but to formally withdraw would happen around after the 2020 elections. So this could resurface as kind of a campaign issue, which would be really interesting to see if it does.
Look, is there a way for him, going back to this idea of the political fallout for President Trump, is there a way for him to save face? Because we know that these emission standards are truly voluntary anyway for each country committing to the agreement. So could he sort of straddle that line to make everybody happy in a sense?
That's a great point, and that's what's going to be interesting to see what kind of language he uses, whether it's a complete withdrawal from this, to your earlier point, or if it's kind of if the language makes it such that makes that clear. And you also have to consider that you have governors and mayors who are saying, we'll go it alone, we'll implement these practices on our own. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch too, kind of the local arguments.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you for joining us, Caitlin.
Thank you.